This is the problem that we're all confronting. And I did that for 30, 40 years. I confronted this part. And I found out that the best place to do that was a place called Speaker's Corner. So I used to go down to Speaker's Corner.
So apparently this guy has been confronting the Quran for 40 years. And where does this epic intellectual duel take place? Speaker's Corner. Basically the WWE of public shouting matches. Not in an academic hall, not in a serious debate, just shouting with random tourists and pigeons. A very stellar resume, professor. And the best part, he acts like Muslims are some rare Pokemon you can only find in parks, when in reality, they have mosques, schools, and entire communities where actual conversation could happen. But sure, keep screaming in the park. History will remember you as the man who bravely debated squirrels.
If you ever go to London, go to Speaker's Corner. It only exists on Sundays. And it's the place you need to go to because that's where you engage with Muslims face to face. It's the greatest laboratory in the world because you can say anything you want. I kid you not. It's the bastion of freedom of speech. It's been around for 200 years.
If you can't get the location facts straight, how exactly are you planning to dismantle Islam? This guy proudly announces that Speaker's Corner has been around for 200 years. Sure, if by 200 years you mean a number I pulled out of thin air, reality check. It officially became free speech spot in 1872. That's 153 years, professor. But don't worry, math and history are optional when you're just vibing on imagination.
That's where they used to execute all the prisoners every Sunday.
First off, the executions took place at Tyburn's Gallows, what's now Marble Arch, not Speaker's Corner. And the Tyburn Gallows, conveniently near Speaker's Corner now, were London's favorite public hanging spots from around 1196 to 1783. Speaker's Corner wasn't established until 1872, which is almost a century later. So congrats, you got both dates and the places wrong in one breath. A very strong start. And about your every Sunday execution fantasy, no, they weren't a weekly church service. They usually happen on market days, Wednesdays and Fridays, or whenever the authorities felt like spicing up the calendar. Sure, Sunday pulled a bigger crowd for the wholesome mix of religion and blood sport, but it wasn't a fixed date. After 1783, executions moved to Newgate Prison to keep the mobs from turning every hanging into a carnival. Meaning for nearly 100 years, Tyburn Gallows saw 0 executions and Speaker's Corner was just a quiet patch of Heidi Park. So not only you are mixing dates and places, you basically invented an entire HBO drama that never existed.
And people would come because there was no television or radio back then. How did they get entertained? They would go and watch the executions on Sunday.
And let me get this straight. People used to flock to watch hangings and beheadings for entertainment. And that's supposed to be the peak of Western civilization. That was the original Netflix Bing, apparently. And then you turn around and accuse Islam and Muslims of being violent. England at that time was as Christian as it gets, strictly Bible country. So maybe take a second to remember which crowd were packing lunches to go watch public executions like it was a Sunday TV show.
And before the prisoners were executed, they were given their last defense.
This whole idea is the biggest myth going. Yes, condemned prisoners at Tyburn did give their so-called final speeches, known as Tyburn sermon or chanting. But let's be clear, these weren't eloquent courtroom defenses or clever legal arguments. They were last-minute confessions, desperate pleas, or straight-up rants screaming from a cart or the gallows. Basically, it was emotional karaoke before the trapdoor opened. Trials had already happened long before. So nobody was litigating from the nose. Not exactly TED Talks, unless you count Today I Learned Gravity as a keynote.
And they would get up on these little soapboxes, stand up on those soapboxes, and they would try to defend what they had done.
Soapboxes? those were a Victoria thing used by reformers decades later, not some leftover stage for dangling convicts. There's zero evidence of soapboxes magically bridging the gap between executions and free speech, like some historical Hogwarts portal. The whole soapbox tradition kicked off in the 1800s, with reformers and loudmouths in Hyde Park using benches, or whatever they can stand on. The romantic tale of execution platforms evolving into Speaker's Corner is just a nice bedtime story. In reality, Speaker's Corner came out of the protests of the 1860s, not some recycled gallows planks.
But the soapboxes remained. So when the executions were finished, the crowds were there, thousands of people, and people got up on those soapboxes and started preaching, or they started teaching, or they started yelling, or they started discussing and debating, and so it became Speaker's Corner.
Sorry to pop your little gothic fantasy bubble, but there's no secret ancestry connecting execution crowds to 19th century soapbox orators. The direct line is a pure myth, like thinking of executions or decapitated heads turning into microphones. Public speaking in Hyde Park didn't sprout from leftover Tyburn hangings. It came decades later, driven by political protests and workers' rights movements. The drama of hanging and the rise of the organized free speech are two completely different stories, no matter how much you want them to rhyme, Professor.
And so it became Speaker's Corner.
No, like we have already said, it had nothing to do with Tyburn gallows or execution crowds. Speaker's Corner was formed decades later out of political protests and workers' rights movement, not from people, trying to have a show at the hangings. So your whole spooky from gallows to free speech narrative is a historical fan fiction. And before you ask why debunk this matter or this detail, it actually does matter because it exposes his character. A guy who builds speeches on lies and lazy shortcuts. He didn't even bother to Google for 2 minutes. It shows you what kind of a liar he is when it comes to argument that matter, and as we will see later. So details matter. Like our dear friend says, the devil is in the details.
Now today we don't use soapboxes anymore, and that's where that term, get off your soapbox, it comes from Speaker's Corner.
And again, that term did not come from there either. Just before World War I, street speeches were all the rage, and speakers literally climbed on soap boxes to get above the crowd, because apparently shouting at strangers was considered to be classy or their way of TikToking. Since then, on a soapbox just means can't stop preaching your opinion. So if you lecture your meat-loving family about vegetarianism, again, don't be surprised when they tell you to shut up and get off your soapbox. Preferably before someone starts handing out a steak as a subtle hint.
Now we use these little kitchen ladders that like you all have in your kitchen, these little A-frame ladders with 2 steps, just so your head's above the audience, so that you can be heard. That's why I feel very comfortable right now, because I'm above you, looking down on you. The problem is, the higher I go, the farther I fall.
You're comfortable, huh? Of course. You got no one around to call out your ignorance. You love looking down at people because your ego is on a permanent vacation, and apparently humility never RSVP'd to your favorite faith lesson. And yes, you soar high, all right. Too bad you've fallen so amazingly low that climbing back isn't just hard, it's basically tragic comedy at this point.
And so Speaker's Corner was very violent back in the 1990s.
Calling Speaker's Corner very violent in the 1990s, please. That's like calling a library a battleground because someone sneezed too loud. Sure, debates were fiery, race, politics, whatever, but actual fist fight, I mean, if you go to Philip Wilmoth's photos of 1990 and LA article Time that spoke about Speaker's Corner, they did say loss of shouting, zero uppercuts. The UK did had unrest in the 90s, but Hayley Park wasn't exactly starting in a Bruce Willis movie. Real violence, that didn't exist. Even Lord Soper, speaking until 98, he called it fellowship of controversy. That's a quote. So basically, a political shouting club, that's what it was. And what about police? Police were there enforcing the 1872 Act at Hayley Park. There is no proof and evidence of violence happening in Hayley Park. I did look at the police archives. I found nothing but haggling and people screaming out loud. There was no violence. Unless you have yourself a document to present to us, I'm more than happy to listen to. As far as the police archives goes, there were no recorded incident of any fights at Speaker's Corner.
They had not yet become the religion of peace. That only happened after 9/11. They were still quite violent. And when they ran out of ideas, they used their fists. And it was not a pleasant place to be.
Here we go again. So basically, you've magically turned Speaker's Corner into a violent war zone just so you can convince everyone that Muslims are out there throwing punches and chaos. And your statement is so cunning. It accuses both Muslims and Islam of being violent. Very brilliant. When I point out your biases and your hatred, which is buried deep down in your heart, this is apparently an evidence to it. And this is how twisted your logic is. And wait, so they were only peaceful after 9/11. Do you mean Muslims and Islam, or your imaginary punching Muslim army? I thought after 9/11, they supposedly got more violent, not less. And when you say they used the fists when they run out of things to say, you make it sound like Speaker's Corner is some kind of maximum security prison, not a public park with heavy police presence. And not to mention, no recorded incidents of Islamic or Muslim violence. Oh, and let's not forget, the Muslim presence at Speaker's Corner back then was pretty low, right? There were only a few people there. Somehow in your story, it's a Muslim-only battlefield. People from all walks of life spoke there, yet you paint it like it's exclusively Muslims. The violent edition. Honestly, your imagination deserves its own soapbox, if I can say that.
But I would go down there every Sunday, and always I would try to engage with them. And we did what we call bitsomp, by the seat of our pants, because there was nothing there to help us. There was no book written on how to engage face-to-face with Muslims and how to debate them and how to discuss them.
You do know you don't need a WikiHow to teach you how to debate. Just like we don't need one to debate you either. It's literally that simple. Read their book, spot their mistakes and their inconsistencies, and confront them. That's all it takes. I don't carry a handbook on how to discuss or debate J. Smith. I just find your mistakes and call them out. But all you had to do was admit your ignorance about Islam and the Quran, and you could have saved yourself from this spectacular embarrassment. Too bad humility wasn't on the syllabus.
Everything was attacking. When I got down there,
physically or intellectually,
they all had Bibles in their hands. Yes, Bibles, not Qurans. None of them had Qurans. They always had Bibles with little post-it notes all the way through. And all these post-it notes were about the historical anachronisms of our Bible, the internal contradictions. Did you?
Oh, so now you're backtracking? They weren't violent like you claimed? Wow, that's a plot twist nobody asked for. And of course they had Bibles. What did you think they were debating with? Paper airplanes? Every time we point out a flaw in your precious book, you start to cry, show me where. So spare me the fairy tale of them not having Qur'ans with them. I'm sure they came prepared, unlike someone we know. Seriously, if you just go to YouTube and watch all the debates in Hayley Park at Speaker's Corner, you will see that every Muslim has a copy of the Qur'an as well as a copy of the Bible. So don't sell me this nonsense.
Did you know that we have all kinds of scientific errors in the Bible? Have you heard about this? I hadn't heard about this.
So let me get this straight. You know your Bible's full of mistakes and errors, and yet you rather stick your head in the sand than admit it. Bold strategy, very inspiring if your goal is eternal denial.
I had 2 master's degrees, one in divinity and the other one in Islamic here at Fuller Seminary, and no one had taught me this.
Absolutely amazing. You had 2 masters, yet you don't even realize how messed up your own Bible and faith are? And now you're trying to dismantle Islam? Honestly, I don't even know what to say anymore. My brain is refusing to cooperate again, and it has officially filed a formal complaint against me at this point.
And I remember the first Sunday I was down there, I was overwhelmed. I had no idea that I was going to get this kind of confrontation. And I wanted to get out of there. And I went home and I was bruised and battered. Not physically, my ego was bruised. Everything, because I thought I knew everything.
So you knew nothing and had nothing, and you still went there. Yeah, true, because all you've got is an ego built from eggshells and empty brain. 2 masters, and you still don't even know your own book. I'm sure you haven't even read it. And then you said you went home, and what happened?
And I went home and I was bruised and battered. Not physically, my ego was bruised. Everything.
Sorry, say that again one more time.
And I went home and I was bruised and battered. Not physically, my ego was bruised. Everything.
One more time, please.
And I went home and I was bruised and battered. Not physically, my ego was bruised. Everything.
Guys, remember that. We will need it later.
My wife saw how disgruntled I was, and so she kicked me out the door the next Sunday and made me go back down again. What a wife.
I'm assuming you discussed her from the usual place of ignorance and fragile beliefs. And honestly, about her kicking you out, I don't blame her. Having someone like you around is not exactly a pretty sight. Truly, what a wife, for having the patience to deal with you.
He says, get back on the horse again. If you're going to fall off the horse, just get back up and learn. Take a notebook with you and just learn and hear what their questions are and then find answers. Now,
Yes, learn. That's an advice we usually give to a 7-year-old heading off to school, not to a man with 2 master degrees. Yet here you are. Even your own wife admits you've never learned anything or even discovered the groundbreaking technology of a notebook and a pen. So instead of saddling up your high horse, maybe try to learn to ride a pony first. What an embarrassment. Anyway, let's move on.
And there was no Google to ask your questions. You had to find out by going to the library or calling up somebody or trying to remember what you learned in seminary. I had nothing to help me.
Well, neither did the Muslims who debated you. There's a thing called reading. Not sure if you made its acquaintance yet. And as for all that learning at the seminary you love to brag about, you already admitted yourself by saying,
I had 2 master's degrees, one in divinity and the other one in Islamic here at Fuller Seminary, and no one had taught me this. And I noticed that all the questions were coming one way, this way. They're always attacking my Lord. Always 2 subjects, Jesus and the Bible.
Again with the attacks? Yes, of course we'll attack you, especially when you try to make a man into a god, which, by the way, he never even acclaimed in your Bible, no matter how much you try to defend that. And beyond that, what else does Christianity really bring to the table? Philosophy, economics, social studies, education, trade, theology, worship, medicine, sciences. All of these and more you'll find in Islam, not in Christianity. From you, all we've heard is accept Jesus as your Savior and you'll be saved. Meanwhile, Muslims already accepted Jesus and Mary. And we believe in the Bible too, just not your version, the original one, which was lost. Thanks to Paul, who somehow went from persecuting Christians to being a saint. Honestly, the whole thing, the whole Bible is a circus of contradictions.
And then I went to and I did a course at the University of London by this man here, Dr. Gerald Houghting.
So now he suddenly decides to learn. Fascinating. Because I'm still not sure what exactly he learned while racking up those 2 master degrees. Anyway, let's move on and see if he actually learns anything at all.
Well, I said, well, I thought I knew everything. This would be a fun course to do. Let's see what he's talking about.
Once again, he's tying himself in knots. First, he says he knew nothing. And now suddenly it's, I thought I knew everything. Which one is it, Professor? He trying to dodge admitting his own ignorance. He shrugs it off with, oh, that would be a fun course. And instead of just saying, I knew nothing, and I took that course because I knew nothing. That would be a much simpler version.
And the very first day, he started saying, do you know, we can't find any reference to this man named Muhammad in the 7th century. Do you know, we can't find any mosque facing Mecca at all in the 7th century? I said, I've never been told this.
Now he claims that Dr. Gerald Hotting one day just came out and said there was no reference to a man named Muhammad in the 7th century and no mosque facing Mecca. So both don't exist. Mind you, he will drag us through these points later in the most boring PowerPoint presentation imaginable. So I won't spoil the snooze fest just yet. But really, do you think Dr. Gerald Hotting, an actual scholar, would make such absurd a claim? I highly doubt it. And why, you may ask? Because Gerald Hotting is a very prominent revisionist Islamicist professor at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. He never denied the existence of Mecca or the Prophet Muhammad as a historical realities. His work critically examines early Islamic traditions, sources, and the development of Islamic institutions like the Kaaba, in his book, The Role of the Kaaba. But he operates within the framework of a historical Prophet Muhammad and pre-Islam Mecca sanctuary. On Mecca, Hotting explicitly accepts Mecca existence and pre-Islamic sanctuary in his writings, such as in his 1982 chapter, The Origins of the Sanctuary at Mecca. That's the title. He analyzes how it was adopted into Islam, not whether it existed. As a revisionist scholar, he questions the traditional narrative of Mecca's centrality in 7th century Arabian trade, suggesting early Islam emerged in a more monotheistic Jewish-influenced setting. However, he defends Mecca historical location against more radical theories, those who, for example, those who relocate Mecca to Petra or northern Arabia, as proposed by Patricia Corona, or Corone, and in her book Mecca Trade, or Tom Holland, which Dr. J. Smith mainly rests entire research on those two. And you will be shocked when these two will be ripped apart as well. So stay focused, stay watching. Therefore, no sources attribute to him any denial of Mecca physical or historical reality. He critiques how traditions betrays it, not if it was there. On Prophet Muhammad, he treats him as a historical figure in his research, focusing on how later sources written 150 to 200 years after his death, shaped the biography, the seerah, and traditions, hadith. For instance, in his book, The Idea of Adultery and the Emergence of Islam in 1999, he discusses Prophet Muhammad polemics against perceived idolatry as rhetorical, not literal pagan opposition in Mecca. He participates, Dr. Hotting, in scholarly discussions on the historical Muhammad, and he has workshops on Seerah and Quranic context, assuming a 7th century Arabian prophet whose life was retroactively elaborated. He even discusses the non-existent views, especially that of Dr. Robert Spencer in his book, Did Muhammad Exist? And he critiques that, and he debates that. He critiques traditional accounts of Islam. but he does not erase Prophet Muhammad. Houghton's approach is skeptical of orthodox Islamic historiography. But his academic critique, not outright denial. If you're encountering any claims of Dr. Houghton denying Islam or denying the existence of Mecca or Prophet Muhammad, is basically misinterpretation of his work. Because he's a very well-educated person on Islam, he made no such a claims in his book. And for those who want to read his books, you can refer to the university website, and they have all his books. So forgive me if I find your words, Mr. Smith, empty of any truth. I will tell you exactly what you got this information from, which you're trying to bring to us to dismantle Islam. You got it from Corona and Tom Holland, which we will dismantle them and you at the same time.
Half the class were made up of Muslim students. And they started getting up, going to the door, slamming the door, turning towards Dr. Houghton and saying not very pleasant things to him, and they never came back. Within 2 weeks, we lost all of our Muslims.
Now, this really makes me question everything you say. It's got lying written all over it. So you expect me to believe that very well-educated Muslims who were university students, mind you, just sat there in silence. None of them had the audacity to question him or debate him. And their grand response was to curse him and leave? That's not just odd, that's cartoon logic. It's clear you just want to put Muslims down in any way you can. So when I say you're a hater, biased, and bigoted, I actually mean it. Because your lies don't just twist facts, they make zero sense.
Started toning down, toning down, toning down. And stopped coming to conclusion and stopped asking these questions. Well,
so he stopped because he kept losing students. That's hilarious. So why didn't that charming little fact make it into his books or articles? If I were Dr. Houghton, I'll be drafting a defamation letter to Mr. Smith.
Then what does that mean, Dr. Houghton? And he wouldn't answer. He didn't want to answer because he didn't want to lose any more students.
And that's exactly why I call you out for your lying, Mr. Smith. If he really held that opinion, why didn't he just tell you? And if you asked him in public and he refused, why not try asking him privately? Or is that too much effort for you? Hold on a second. Didn't he already tell you, if we rewind a minute and actually follow the story, you did say he told you. You lied in less than a minute.
So I start taking this down to Speaker's Corner. And I start putting it up there. And I got beat up. I mean, physically beat up. They knocked me out.
Oh boy. Let the fun begin.